Hello, listener. The fact you hear this means you're alive. If you're new here, consider subscribing and comment below where you're listening from. Let's begin the story. My name is Bram Kade, and this dockhouse was never meant to keep people alive. It was a utility box on stilts over brown water, a place to sign delivery slips, fix radio static, and drink bad coffee between boats. Now, every straight line of it matters to me more than anything ever has. I worked harbor maintenance before the outbreak. Small coastal town, one main road in and one half-rotten bridge out. My days were winches, pumps, fuel lines, busted cleats, and skippers who thought yelling fixed rust. I knew every ladder and piling from the ferry pier to the fuel yard. I knew this dockhouse too, but only as a stop on the way to real work. The building stands on 6 concrete legs over a shallow inlet. A narrow metal walkway used to run from the parking lot to the front door, just wide enough for one person. On the far side, a steel ladder drops straight into the water. Inside, it's one room, a storage nook and a crawl space with cables. No one ever called it cozy. It smelled like diesel, wet ropes, and stale paper. When the first reports started talking about a fast flu and sudden violence in bigger cities, nobody here cared much. We get storms, we get evacuations. The same 3 rumors every hurricane season. People stocked batteries and beer, joked about staying home, and kept the TV on while the anchors tried not to sound afraid. I cared about one thing more than the rest of town. I cared about routes. I knew where crowds would form when panic hit, and I knew which places were hard to reach in numbers. The dockhouse sat near the top of that list. I didn't know it would become home then. That Tuesday afternoon, the world began to unravel. It stopped feeling like just a flu and started to feel like the actual end of things. Our harbor dispatcher had called me to check a jammed gate at the service yard. I fixed the fault, hit reset, and waited for the guard to step back. He didn't move. His name was Kerrigan. He stood near the post with his hand on the panel, his eyes half-lidded, unfocused. The bar rose halfway, stuttered, and dropped again. I hit the manual override and told him to step back. He didn't blink. "You good, Kerr?" I asked, pulling the panel cover aside. "You look wiped." He turned his head toward my voice, but his focus slid right past me like he was looking at a wall behind my shoulder. There was dried blood beneath his nose, and the skin on his left wrist was broken, a raw, chewed patch where he dragged it along something rough. "You need a medic," I said. "Sit down, I'll call someone." He made a sound that almost started like a word, then broke in the middle. Then he stepped forward in a flat, heavy way that didn't match his frame, his movements unnervingly deliberate. I backed up out of pure reflex. He didn't stop until his chest bumped the gate, and when the bar came down again, it hit his shoulder with a hollow thud. He didn't react, not even a flinch. That was the first time I saw eyes that tracked motion without a shred of recognition behind them. When I reached for his arm to guide him away, he snapped at my forearm with his teeth. I jerked back, startled. He stumbled. The gate kept cycling, relentlessly. I slammed the emergency stop. When I looked again, he was clawing at his own wrist, tearing fresh skin right next to the old raw damage. I didn't fight him. I didn't try to help. I just slammed the inner gate shut, stepped quickly into the yard, and locked the service door behind me. Then I called the port office, reporting a medical emergency and a mechanical fault. They told me to go home, stay put, and wait for updates. Back home, the local station abruptly cut from regular ads to a national feed. The anchor read from a sheet, her voice strained while the ticker scrolled horrifying updates, clusters and containment. Street clips played on a frantic loop, police lines folded in seconds on live video. Every city felt like somewhere else, a problem far away, until they showed a strip mall that looked exactly like ours and then a hospital with the same familiar cross on its sign. Outside my window, sirens rose and dropped unevenly, a symphony of escalating panic. But none of them came down our street. I grabbed a legal pad from the kitchen drawer and started instinctively writing down routes instead of my usual maintenance notes. Crowds I knew always moved to the same places. They'd instinctively flock to hospitals, schools, big box stores, gas stations by the highway. They'd follow any sign that promised help or an exit. Our town had one hospital up on the hill, one supermarket by the rotary, one on-ramp to the main road, and a small marina where folks mostly paid to sit on water, not move on it. The Dockhouse, by sheer luck, sat away from all that. A service pier, it had no public parking, no bustling fish shack, no noisy bar. You didn't go out there unless you worked there. It offered just one narrow walkway, one ladder down to the water, and a steel door with a perpetually cranky lock. From the main road, you barely noticed it at all, hidden behind the maze of pallets and idling forklifts. On the pad, I drew a tight circle around the Dockhouse, then scrawled 3 words beneath it. Small, elevated choke points. Then beneath that, I listed everything that could kill that inherent advantage. Too many windows, a thin door, weak hinges, no backup food, severely limited water, and a clear line of sight from the yard. Once it was committed to ink, the strategy simplified into a harsh new mantra. Fix what you can. Avoid the rest. I didn't decide to move in that very second. No, the immediate pragmatic decision was to load the truck. My garage held all the boring parts of my life that, in a sudden terrifying twist, now mattered more than anything. Camping stove, fuel canisters, 2 water jugs, foul weather gear, a sturdy crowbar, a coil of thick rope, heavy work gloves. I methodically loaded them into the truck bed, trying hard not to think about how long they might actually have to last. On the radio, a grim recorded message began to interrupt every single program. Stay in your homes, stay off the roads, avoid contact with anyone who appears confused, injured, or unusually aggressive. Emergency services are experiencing significant delays. The last line translated easily, chillingly. You are on your own. My neighbor, old Mr. Henderson across the street, stood at his car with the trunk agape while his wife loudly argued with him about which road to take inland. He spotted me with the rope in my hands and lifted his chin in a weary acknowledgement. You heading out, Bram? He called, his voice tight. Not yet, I answered. Gonna check the yard, just see how bad the port really is. You're crazy if you stay near town, he said, shaking his head. They're saying go inland. They're also saying stay off the roads, I countered, pointing pointedly at his trunk. You really want to sit on the bridge in that kind of traffic? He looked from the distant highway sign to the ominous hospital on the hill. Both, ironically, lay in the same direction. He swore under his breath, slammed the trunk with finality, and climbed in. As they peeled away, their dog, which had been barking frantically, finally went quiet. Once his taillights vanished down the empty street, the world outside my window seemed to change, instantly. No kids on bikes, no rumbling delivery trucks. Just the faint, mournful whine of a siren fading down the coast and the rhythmic slap of water against the bulkhead 2 blocks away. I locked my front door out of pure, deep-seated habit, then drove to the harbor, propelled by something closer to raw instinct. If I was going to be trapped somewhere, and it was looking more and more like I would be, I wanted it to be a place where I understood every single angle, every hidden flaw and forgotten advantage. The Dockhouse. It was the smallest, simplest box I knew, and now, that suddenly sounded like a profound strength instead of its usual nagging limitation. The drive down to the harbor took 10 minutes. The closer I got, the less the town sounded like itself. No trucks idled at the way station, no forklifts beeped behind the warehouses, no cars sat at the rotary. When I turned onto the service road and saw the main gate chained shut with a torn, closed by order notice hanging, I knew I wasn't coming here for work anymore. I swung past the main gate into the smaller service lot closer to the water and the Dockhouse. The lot was almost empty. No company pickups, no contractors' vans, no guys in hard hats leaning on bumpers with coffee. Just my truck, a forklift frozen with its forks halfway up, and a pallet of shrink-wrapped drums sitting crooked on cracked asphalt. The guard shack door stood open. Inside, the chair lay on its side as if someone had stood up fast and never righted it. Beyond all that, the Dockhouse sat on its 6 concrete legs over the inlet. The same faded box I'd walked past 100 times without really seeing. A narrow steel walkway ran from the broken asphalt to the front door. On the far side, a ladder went straight down to brown water and mud. One small room on top, one door, one ladder. The warehouses behind me had loading bays, side doors, fire stairs, roof hatches. They were mazes. The dockhouse was a choke point with a roof. I shut off the engine and listened. No nearby sirens, no traffic on the hill road, no horns at the rotary. The tide sat mid-range, mud stains on the pilings marking its upper line. This inlet stayed shallow even at high tide, with a soft bottom that grabbed boots and tipped carts. Boats avoided it. Anything on foot coming from the land side would have to cross that walkway. I grabbed what I could carry in one trip: camping stove, fuel canisters, 2 water jugs, a coil of rope, a crowbar, a duffel with clothes, a box with every can and dry bag from my cupboards. 2 lighter trips would have been smarter in the old world. In this one, fewer walks across open ground seemed the better trade. I locked the truck out of habit and went for the grate. The first step onto the steel walkway rang louder than I liked. I stopped, shifted the box against my hip and scanned the lot again. No movement by the forklift, no shadow in the shack window, no heads in the warehouse doors. Just wind on sheet metal and the steady slap of small waves under the pilings. I walked the rest of the way with one hand on the rail, spreading my weight so the grating wouldn't bounce and sing. The dockhouse door stuck for a second, then opened with the same short jerk it always had. Inside smelled like wet paper and rope. One front desk, one side desk, a counter with a radio and a coiled mic cord, a metal cabinet full of binders, a small stainless sink, and a corner stacked with life jackets and tarps. It had always been a place to sign forms, call the harbor master, and go back out. Now it was 4 walls I didn't have to share. I shut the door, threw the bolt, and killed the overhead lights. Daylight through the windows was enough to see by for now. At night, any bulb I left on would turn the building into a signal. I wanted the option to move inside without advertising it to anyone crossing the yard. There were 4 windows, 2 facing the lot and 2 the inlet, all single panes with tired frames. Glass alone wasn't going to keep anything out. We kept scrap lumber stacked under the overhang outside. I went back once, grabbed as much as I could hold, carried it in, then shut and locked the door again. With a handsaw, I cut boards to cover the lower half of each frame and ran screws straight into the studs. It was rough, but it turned clear glass into wood someone would have to work at. I left a strip open at the top of every window, letting me see out and air move. From the yard, those gaps would read as shadow. From inside, they were thin slots to watch the lot and the inlet without putting my whole head in the glass. By the time the last board went up, my shoulders burned from pushing the driver. The storage nook held coils of line, old buoys, 3 orange buckets, a box of expired flares, and a sealed first aid kit. I filled the buckets at the inlet for wash water and set my 2 jugs by the wall for drinking. Then I sat at the side desk and wrote the first rules: 1 door, 1 walkway, 1 ladder, no wasted light, no wasted noise. Night came fast once the boards were up. The yard side of the windows shifted from gray to flat black in less than an hour. The gap at the top showed a thin band of sky for a while, then nothing. Without streetlights, the town felt smaller, swallowed by the sudden dark. Phone bars dropped to 1, then quickly to none. Service went from slow to utterly dead. I didn't trust the main power feed, so I flipped off every breaker except for the one that powered a single outlet by the radio and a small fixture over the sink. That way, if the yard went dark or started to surge, I wouldn't lose more than 1 circuit. The camping stove sat on bare metal by the window, its fuel canister nearby, matches tucked into a dry cup. Instead of turning the radio on right away, I walked the room again. It helped to treat it the way we used to treat pump rooms. Step, look, touch, always asking what could break. The floor felt solid, but it was old. One soft board near the door got a piece of plywood screwed over it so my weight wouldn't punch through at the worst possible time. Loose cables along the wall went up onto hooks. Anything that could roll went into a crate, secured against unexpected movement. Only then did I finally sit at the desk and turn the radio on. Static at first, then a distant station cutting in and out, a ghost of a voice. The voice on it sounded like it hadn't slept in a while, They repeated the same urgent lines in cycles. Stay in your homes, avoid crowds, do not approach anyone who attacks without warning. Hospitals were reportedly at capacity. Roadblocks were up on major routes. They didn't say the word dead. Instead, they said affected. They said unstable. I'd seen Kerrigan chew his own wrist raw and bite at me like an animal. Whatever lived behind his eyes that day wasn't just unstable. It was gone, utterly. The voice faded, came back, then abruptly cut to a recorded message. That one gave numbers, grim statistics. Confirmed cases soared from the hundreds into the thousands. They listed major cities, then smaller ones, then entire regions. Our own coast came near the chilling end of that list. I shut it off. Knowing that every place bigger than us was already burning didn't make my small box feel any safer. It just solidified the chilling truth. No one was coming down this service road with a plan. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I unrolled my old camp pad in the corner, positioning it so I could see the door and the gap above the windows without even lifting my head. Boots stayed on, jacket too. My crowbar was within easy reach, not because I thought it would save me from an inevitable swarm, but because having some solid weight in my hand felt infinitely better than lying there empty and defenseless. Noise carried strangely over the water at night. You lose the steady hum of traffic and the random shouts from bars, and suddenly, small sounds jump out, amplified. A loose piece of siding on the warehouse across the inlet clacked now and then, a lonely, rhythmic sound. A halyard knocked rhythmically against a mast somewhere down the main harbor. Once late into the night, a single gunshot cracked from the hill, then nothing but silence. Gray light finally began to seep back into the gaps. The town didn't look different in outline, but it certainly felt stripped, raw. No cars moved on the road above the warehouses. No smoke rose from any vents. A lone gull landed on a light pole, waited a moment, and then flew off, leaving the silence undisturbed. Morning routine formed faster than I'd expected. Check the lot, check the inlet, check the door, check myself for cuts or bites I knew weren't there, a nervous habit forming already. Fill one bucket. Mark one line in the notebook. Coffee on the stove in a dented pot. 2 crackers, 1 measured spoon of peanut butter. By late morning, the first infected I saw from the dockhouse crossed the far end of the yard. 3 figures drifted between the trailers, spaced out as if they'd started in a group and then simply lost track of each other. From the slot above the window, I watched them move, a morbid fascination taking hold. It wasn't the stumbling you see in movies. They walked, but the rhythm was all wrong. Too much weight on one step, not nearly enough bend in the next. One dragged a foot, a dead weight. Another held his head tilted as if listening to something only he could hear, a phantom whisper. None of them bothered to look around, not the way healthy people do in an open space, assessing their surroundings. They reached a forklift left abandoned in the lane. One bumped it with a shoulder, stopped, then started pushing uselessly at the mast, a senseless, repetitive motion. Another slid a hand along the cold metal side until its fingers simply slipped off. They didn't call to each other. They didn't even seem to know they were together. I stayed absolutely still, letting them pass out of sight. The urge to yell, to test if they would turn to a human voice, sat in my throat like a heavy stone. But I knew better. Curiosity in this new world could kill you faster than any bite. Around midday, a car tore down the road above the warehouses, its engine revving high and wild. It blew through the intersection without even slowing, clipped the corner of a parked truck, and kept going, the horn blaring relentlessly. A minute later, the infected I'd been watching turned abruptly toward the sound and moved away. Drawn like moths to a flame, they reacted more clearly to that noise than they had to anything else in the yard. It fit exactly what the radio had hinted at. Distance and barriers mattered more than mere speed or toughness. Anything that made big, attracting sounds or put you in dense crowds was bad news. Anything that kept you behind a solid door with a clear exit route, however, was damn good. I immediately added more lines to the rules. No engines near the dockhouse unless absolutely needed. No shouting from the walkway. And no running across open ground in daylight unless there was absolutely no other option. The first full day ended without anyone trying my door. The world outside the inlet was clearly burning down, collapsing into chaos, but this little platform over brown water still, miraculously, belonged to me. For now, that was enough to plan around, enough to keep. By the second morning, the Dockhouse felt less like a place I was hiding in and more like a project I was solely responsible for. Hiding ends when someone opens the door. Projects, on the other hand, keep going as long as you're willing to work them. I started with what could kill me fastest. Air was fine. The gaps at the top of the windows moved enough of it. Water was next. I had 2 jugs of drinking water and 3 buckets of harbor water for washing. That wasn't a long-term plan. The inlet itself was shallow and filthy. Anything that spilled upriver inevitably ended up down here. We used to joke that if you fell in near the storm drains, you'd grow a second head. It wasn't a joke now. I wasn't about to drink from the inlet unless I absolutely had to, and if it ever came to that, I needed a way to make it better than just raw, unfiltered filth. The storage nook, a forgotten corner, held old gear nobody had bothered to throw out. In one dusty crate, I found a plastic funnel, a roll of mesh, 2 cracked cans, and half a bag of charcoal. No fancy lab setup here, just plastic, gravity, and good old common sense. I cut the bottoms off the cracked cans, stacked mesh and cloth in the funnel, and packed charcoal on top. It wasn't perfect filtration, but it would be enough to take out the grit and the worst taste if things got desperate. I taped a short instruction on the side so that even if I was half asleep, I could still follow the same crucial order. Catch, settle, filter, boil. Food came next. I spread everything I had on the counter. Cans of soup and beans, crackers, 1 jar of peanut butter, some jerky, and 2 trail mix bags that were more peanuts than anything else. In a proper kitchen, it might have looked like a decent stash, but spread out on the bare counter of this empty building, it looked painfully thin. I went simple. 1 main can a day, split between 2 meals plus a little starch or nuts with each. If I caught fish, the cans would last longer. If I didn't, those cans still had to stretch for at least 3 weeks. The less I walked out across that exposed lot, the better my odds. Fishing from the Dockhouse was possible, but I wasn't about to stand on an open platform waving a fishing rod around like an advertisement. There was old line and a couple of hooks in a drawer by the sink. I tied 2 hand lines instead, dropped them through gaps between the deck planks on the water side, and tied the other ends to a chair leg. If something tugged hard enough, the chair would scrape across the floor and I'd definitely hear it. Power was a long-term problem I couldn't even begin to solve on day 2, so I focused on short-term habits. The light over the sink stayed off unless I was directly under it. The radio came on at fixed times, 15 minutes in the morning, 15 at dusk. Phones stayed off, they were useless weight anyway. During the first morning radio window, I finally found a station close enough that the voice didn't get entirely drowned out by static. They dropped the soft words. The anchor called it an outbreak now. Reports of violence in hospitals, attacks in homes, police overwhelmed, stretched impossibly thin. They advised not to gather at hospitals unless specifically told to. Do not crowd emergency rooms. Do not approach anyone who appears injured and doesn't respond when spoken to. Hearing them describe Kerrigan without using his name told me the problem was everywhere, not just contained to my single isolated gate. They mentioned guard deployments in the cities. They didn't mention towns our size. No one on the broadcast said a thing about small harbors with sheds at the edge of bad water. Once the window closed, I shut the radio off and went back to walking the room. I made myself touch every latch and brace again, learning their feel in the dark, committing the layout to muscle memory. If my hands knew where everything was, I'd need less light later. In the early afternoon, hunger, a more immediate concern, pushed worry about the lot out of my head. I heated half a can of soup with a splash of water and ate it by the waterside window. Keeping my eyes peeled, the inlet looked deceptively calm. A slick of something dark moved along the far shore where a drain emptied its foul contents. The warehouses across the way sat with their bay doors open, gaping maw-like. No movement. My truck still sat in the lot where I'd left it, and I'd loaded it in a hurry, focused only on the essentials. There were tools in the back I hadn't managed to grab: bolt cutters, a small sledgehammer, a box of screws, extra rope. There was also a cooler on the passenger seat with precious bottled water and 2 more days of food. Every bite on my bare counter argued for going out. Every instinct screamed against stepping off the steel walkway. In the end, I went with a compromise. I waited 10 full minutes by the slot above the door, counting slow, watching every corner of the yard with hawk-like intensity. Wind moved a scrap of plastic. Nothing else. I backed away from the window, grabbed the crowbar, and slung the empty duffel bag across my chest. Bolt, handle, door, walkway. I moved fast, but not so fast that I forgot where my feet were going. The steel under me gave that same faint, betraying ring. I kept my eyes fixed on the truck. The lot stayed still, eerily quiet. Up on the hill, a column of smoke had started rising near the hospital. I didn't want to know why. I unlocked the truck, grabbed the cooler and the toolbox, and shoved both into the duffel. On impulse, I also pulled the truck's floor mats and stuffed them under my arm. Rubber, I thought, is always useful. On the way back to the dockhouse, a siren started somewhere inland, rose in a banshee wail, and then cut off abruptly mid-cry. I found another gear in my legs, pushing faster without consciously deciding to. I hit the doorframe with my shoulder, swung it shut with a grunt, threw the bolt, and leaned my back on it until my ragged breathing settled. I logged the trip in my notebook carefully as a critical event. Nothing thumped against the wood. No hands hit the glass. The only sounds were the soft slap of water under the pilings and the heavy rhythm of my own breath. For that day, the dockhouse had let me leave and come back, but I knew that window wouldn't stay open forever. After that last frantic run to the truck, days settled into a grim, simple pattern. Mornings meant checking the lot and inlet, hauling one bucket, tightening any small thing that might look like it could fail. Midday was dedicated to stretching out my meager food supply and intently watching the water. At night, I lay on my camp pad, boots still on, and listened hard to the unsettling quiet. The floor mats I'd salvaged from the truck went down near the door and under the main desk. Rubber on wood meant less noise if I had to move fast, less of that betraying creak. I even cut a strip to fit precisely under the window by the lot so my boots wouldn't squeak when I stood there peering out. On the third morning, one of the hand lines I'd set finally went tight. The chair scraped softly across the floor, and that small, unexpected noise made me freeze, every nerve alert. I pulled the line slow, hand over hand, carefully. A small striped bass broke the surface with a splash and slapped against the piling, fighting. It wasn't big, but it was fresh meat, a victory. I cleaned it over a bucket at the sink, tossed the head and guts far out from the ladder, didn't want anything attracting attention nearby, and fried the fillets in a pan with a little oil. Half I ate hot, savoring every bite. The other half I wrapped carefully for later. That afternoon, the tide shifted and the water thickened perceptibly. Bits of trash and debris drifted lazily past the pilings, a morbid parade. Once, a gray, indistinct shape bumped a post with a dull, sickening knock. An arm floated up, turned slowly once before slipping silently back under the murky surface. I was still staring out the waterside window when a different sound suddenly cut through the silence from the yard. Not a car. Footsteps. Hard, fast footsteps on broken asphalt. I moved to the slot above the lot window and pressed my eyes to the narrow gap. A man burst out from between 2 warehouse walls, hitting the open ground at a full sprint. He looked young, dressed in a dark hoodie and jeans, one arm held tightly to his side. Behind him, 3 infected spilled out of the same gap just seconds later, drawn by the urgent sound of his shoes slapping against the pavement. He initially aimed straight for the inlet, but saw the thick mud at the edge and abruptly cut toward my lot instead. His shoes slipped on the loose gravel, but he caught himself on the corner of a discarded pallet and kept going, driven by pure terror. The 3 behind him didn't slow, their relentless pace unwavering. My first thought was stark and simple: stay quiet, let it pass. Saving strangers wasn't on my list of priorities. Keeping my door closed, keeping myself alive, that was paramount. Then he shouted, "Hey, on the dock!" His voice cracked, raw with desperation. "Please, somebody!" He'd seen the boarded windows, the solid door. He knew someone had put work into this place. That desperate shout turned all three infected even more intensely toward him. One stumbled, then locked onto his presence, finding a burst of speed I really didn't like. My truck keys hung on a hook by the desk, the red panic button on the fob smooth from years of unconscious use. I grabbed them without thinking, darted back to the window, and pointed the fob directly at the lot. The truck burst into a cacophony of sound. The horn blared, the lights strobed erratically, hazards jumping wildly in the gray afternoon light. All three infected snapped their heads toward it like I'd hooked them on a line. They immediately veered off the man and started their slow, heavy, single-minded push toward the noise. "Keep running," I murmured under my breath, my voice low and urgent. He did. He cut hard toward the steel walkway, his legs visibly shaking now with exhaustion. I hit the panic button again. The horn cut off, then came back in short, sharp bursts. I didn't want to kill the battery in case I needed this trick another time, but I had to hold their attention for a few more crucial seconds. The man reached the very start of the walkway, stumbling onto it. Up close, he looked even younger, probably mid-20s, his dark hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. There was blood on his sleeve, but it looked soaked in, dried, not like it was actively pumping fresh from a wound. I left the window and quickly went to the door. The smart move, the truly logical move, would have been to keep it locked and simply pretend nobody lived here. But I didn't. I still threw the bolt and cracked it open just an inch. "Straight to the end," I said through the narrow gap, my voice low and firm. "No stopping, no touching the rail. Get to the door and show me your hands." He nodded, not quite looking at me, and kept coming, his pace still ragged. The walkway bounced precariously under his weight. In the lot, one of the infected reached the truck and hit its side hard enough to rock the entire vehicle. The horn kept going, a maddening rhythm. He finally reached the end of the walkway and slapped his palms flat against the doorframe. I saw skin and dirt, but no bite marks on his wrists or fingers. His eyes were wide and alert, filled with terror, but also intelligence, not flat and vacant like Kerrigan's had been. "Any bites?" I asked, my voice still tight. "Anywhere?" "No," he gasped, sucking in air. "Cuts, yeah, no bites." "Turn around," I instructed. "Lift your shirt, slowly." He did it, his hands shaking, awkwardly spinning on the narrow grate. No missing chunks of flesh, no fresh blood actively soaking through, just scrapes and one deep cut along his side that had already crusted over. It would definitely need cleaning, but it definitely didn't look like teeth marks. I opened the door just wide enough for him to slip through, then slammed it shut and threw the bolt home the instant his heel cleared the frame. We both leaned against it for a second, breathing hard, the adrenaline slowly subsiding. The horn finally died in the lot, leaving a sudden, profound quiet that felt almost pointed, accusing. "Name?" I asked, finally catching my breath. "Sul," he said, his voice raspy. "Sol Reyes. Thanks for not leaving me out here." "Bram," I replied, my tone still gruff. "You bleed on my floor, I'm going to be annoyed." He gave a short, rough laugh that quickly turned into a cough. "Deal," he managed, a faint smile touching his lips. Sol slid down the wall by the door and sat heavily on the floor mat, his knees drawn up. Sweat had soaked through his hoodie and his lips were the color of paper. For a minute, we just sat there, listening. Nothing hit the door. Nothing scraped the walkway. The only sound was the rhythmic knock of water against the pilings beneath our feet. "Tell me what you ran from," I said, my voice low. "Start with where you were." "Community center," he answered, his voice still a little hoarse. They'd turned the gym into a shelter when the hospital filled. Cots everywhere, people on the floor, kids crying, volunteers trying to look calm. First night was loud but fine. Second night, someone in the far corner started screaming and didn't stop. Then more people screamed. Then there were just bodies on the floor and this wet, sickening thud. By morning, half the gym was bitten or missing. They yelled about buses coming to move us, but nobody knew where. I didn't want to be in another packed room waiting for instructions that never showed. I could picture it easily. High ceiling, polished floor. One main exit that always jammed during fire drills. I'd seen enough evacuation plans to know how fast a bad layout turns against you. "How'd you get that cut?" I asked, nodding towards his side. "Main door," he said, grimacing. Everybody pushed at once. I got shoved into the frame, bounced off, and went under someone's feet. Nobody even saw me go down. I crawled under a car and stayed there until the noise moved away. When I came out, the buses were gone, the cruisers were gone, and some of the people who got hit the night before were just standing in the lot. Heads bent, eyes glassy, jaws moving. They watched anything that moved, but didn't say a word. I climbed the back hill, cut between houses, and followed the sound of the harbor. Figured water was better than more people. The town had always treated the harbor like a postcard. I'd always treated it like a wall that could work for you or against you, depending on exactly where you stood. "We're cleaning that cut," I said matter-of-factly. "If it gets infected, you're done for, even if you never see another one of them. The bathroom's that door right there. The sink out here still runs. We've got gloves and gauze. If you feel like you're about to pass out, say it before you hit the floor." He tried to stand too fast and had to catch himself on the wall. I handed him a bottle of clean water and pointed him toward the head. While he rinsed off the blood, I pulled the first aid kit down and dumped its contents on the counter. Dried tubes and split packets went straight into the trash. Sterile pads and sealed wipes stayed. When he came back, his shirt lifted. The cut looked cleaner, but still angry. A long, shallow slice with one deeper groove where metal had grabbed him. I pulled on gloves and went over it with the last antiseptic that still looked clear. He sucked air through his teeth but stayed perfectly still. "You do this a lot?" he asked, a nervous laugh escaping. "I used to fix pumps and decks," I said. "Now I fix whatever staggers through that door. Hold that pad there. Press until it stops trying to talk to you." He gave a dry, half-hearted laugh. "Back there it was all screams," he said, his voice dropping. "People yelling for help, yelling names, doors slamming, stuff falling. You couldn't tell who was hurt and who was already gone. You go toward one voice and 3 more start screaming behind you." "That's why you listen first now," I said firmly, taping the gauze down. "And you stay away from rooms with more people than exits. How many do you think made it out?" "No idea," he admitted. "I didn't stay to count. I saw my neighbor get dragged down by 3 people who used to sit behind us at games. None of them looked like they knew her. That was enough math for me. Big groups stopped feeling safe and started feeling like bait. That matched what I'd already written in my notebook. Crowds are just stacks of unknowns, and unknowns kill you fast." I gave him half a can of beans and some crackers. He ate slow at first, then faster as his hands steadied and the reality of hunger set in. Watching someone else work through my dwindling shelf hurt a little, but the Dockhouse now held 2 people, not 1. A plan that only feeds 1 person isn't going to work the moment you have company. "I'm not trying to move in," he said, sensing my thoughts. "I just needed not to die between pallets. I can head out once it's quieter." "This isn't a bus stop," I said, my tone flat. "If you stay, you follow the rules. If you leave clean and quiet so nothing tracks you back. Either way, this place has to stay hard to spot and harder to reach. That's the only reason it works." He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "What rules?" I pointed at the cardboard tacked above the desk. "1 door in use, 1 ladder, 1 walkway. No shouting, no bright windows if we can help it. No engines in this lot unless we plan it. We don't walk toward noise just to see what it is. We cross open ground only when we have a reason, and it's on our schedule, not because something out there starts yelling." He nodded slowly, taking it all in. "You got a rule about people?" "Yeah," I said. "We don't open for every voice. Today I burned a truck horn to pull 3 biters off you. That trick might not work again, and now they know this lot isn't empty. I'm not doing that for every stranger who runs past. If you ever talk about this place, you tell them it isn't a shelter. It's a small office with bad coffee and decent locks." He smiled, a fleeting, genuine smile. "You make it sound almost nice," he said. "Don't get sentimental," I answered, my gaze steady. Half the time I regret letting myself in. The rest of the afternoon went to smaller, more mundane work. We walked the metal walkway and checked the rail for fresh scuffs or mud. Nothing new. We watched the lot from the narrow slot until our eyes blurred from the effort. 2 infected crossed the far end once, turning their heads towards some sound we couldn't hear. A phantom echo. They never looked up. The boards and shadows did their job. Near dusk, I let Sewell run the radio while I listened, leaning back. The same station came in, even thinner than before. The anchor sounded hoarse, tired, and completely done pretending. 2 days with 2 people changed the Dockhouse more profoundly than the first week alone ever did. Sewell, surprisingly, turned out to be useful in ways I hadn't expected. Before all this, he'd worked at a print shop and streamed games. That sounded entirely useless until I watched him trace streets in the notebook, marking routes with tight lines and small, efficient symbols. His brain liked maps. Mine liked hardware. Between us, the rules we'd established quickly evolved into a concise manual for one small box on the water. We logged everything. Weather patterns, tide changes, infected sightings in the yard, distant gunshots, smoke plumes, and crucially, radio notes. On the 4th night Saul spent inside, the radio brought us someone new. We had the set on low for our usual dusk window. The familiar station was halfway through another grim warning when a new voice cut in, clear and crisp like a handheld mic held close to someone's mouth. "This is Hilltop Relay calling any harbor stations on 9, a woman's voice stated, calm amidst the static. "If you're near the south inlet and still have walls, respond." Saul looked at me, his eyes wide. "That has to be us," he whispered. I waited 10 tense seconds. No one else answered. When the frequency opened up again, the woman repeated the exact same line, her patience unwavering. I picked up our handheld and pressed the transmit button. "Dockhouse here," I said, my voice steady. "1 elevated structure on the south inlet, 2 inside, go ahead." "Dockhouse, copy 2, she answered, her reply coming fast. "Call sign Hilltop Relay. Operator Nia Harrow. We're in the old fire tower on Ridge Lane. We monitor bands and mark hot zones. Just so you know, we don't take walk-ins and we don't promise rescue." "What do you need from us?" I asked, cutting straight to it. "Eyes on that inlet," she said. "From here we see the hill, the bridge, the hospital. We see fires, gridlock, herds. Your warehouses block the water. All we know is somebody boarded an office down there and stayed quiet. We want to know if that's you and if you plan to hold." "We plan to stay as long as the legs do," I replied, a touch of grim humor in my voice. "What exactly do you mean by herds?" "Groups of infected moving together," she answered, her tone grim. "Anything over a dozen. The supermarket ridge never fully clears. The hospital lot is a solid, unmoving mass. The bridge jams, clears by fire, jams again. Your inlet, however, has stayed thin. A few bodies drift. No waves of them." Sewell, ever the analyst, drew a tiny tower in the notebook and wrote Hilltop next to it, then circled the Dockhouse and linked them with a neat line. "What's the trade?" I asked. "Information isn't free." "I want your counts," she stated. "You log that water and that lot. In return, I'll tell you when a herd leaves the ridge, when the bridge fails, which parts of town have turned into traps and which might still hold food or fuel without a mob on the doors." It sounded like a fair enough deal to me. "Dawn and dusk checks," I confirmed. "We call you twice a day. Outside those windows, we keep the mic dead unless something's actually on the walkway." "Clean enough," she said. "Dockhouse, confirm your only land access is that metal footbridge off the service lot." Sewell's eyes flicked to mine, a silent question. "She can see us," he muttered. "Confirmed," I said into the mic. "1 steel walkway, 1 ladder, that's it." "You might want to think about how much you like that walkway," Nia warned, her voice devoid of emotion. "We watched a bus get pinned sideways on the bridge. People tried to squeeze around it, half went over the rail. The rest got taken apart when the pack hit. A choke point is good until the pressure spikes. If your lot fills and they lean, that rail and that door are gone. We know it's a problem, I admitted. Right now, though, it's also how we move supplies. Understood, she replied. From up here, your Dockhouse is the last elevated point inside town we still mark as stable. The school burned. The community center begged for buses, then went silent. The marina tried to stay open and turned into a feeding line. Every other mark on our map crossed itself out. Your box is the only one that hasn't gone dark or started screaming. We're not a shelter, I said, reiterating my core rule. We can't be. I'm not asking you to feed anyone, she answered, her voice firm. Hold one square of ground and tell me when the water changes. That's it. Hilltop out until dawn. I shut the radio off, the silence suddenly heavy. So, we're the last calm dot on her map, Sul observed, breaking the quiet. Until we screw up, I replied. The only difference now is someone else will actually see when this place goes dark. At dawn, we kept the deal. I watched the inlet, scanning the murky water. Sul watched the yard, his gaze sharp. 3 infected drifted along the far side near the drain, bent over some unseen trash, then shuffled on. No bodies bumped the pilings. No new ominous stains marked the walkway. Dockhouse to Hilltop, I radioed in. Dawn check. 3 infected far bank, none in the lot, no drift bodies overnight, no fresh smoke inland. Copy, Nia answered. Supermarket ridge still hot. Hospital lot is packed and static. Bridge is half cleared by fire. 2 attempts to push across failed. 1 small burn at the marina. We're hearing more beacons from outside town. If anyone official is moving, they're using the highway, not your pier. So we're off the checklist, I said, a faint hope rising. That's exactly where you want to be, she stated, her dry tone unmistakable. Places on lists keep getting hit. Stay boring. Hilltop clear. The link dropped back to static. I set the radio beside the notebook and looked at the rules I'd scrawled on the cardboard. Same room, same door, same walkway and ladder. The only new thing was a voice on a hill and a chilling fact we couldn't dodge anymore. As far as anyone watching from higher ground was concerned, this Dockhouse really was the only safe place left in town, and our job was not to prove them wrong. Hilltop kept us honest. Once someone was watching from above, it became hard to pretend the town might bounce back. Every dawn and dusk check sounded like a slow list of things that used to exist. From her tower, Nia saw patterns we could only sense at ground level, and she tried to warn us early on most days. A week after Saul came in, Nia's report changed. Hilltop to Dockhouse, she said. We've got a herd peeling off the supermarket ridge, 30, maybe 40 of them. They're drifting south, not west. Vector puts them behind your warehouses in 4 to 6 hours. High or low? I asked. Ridge road or service lanes? Service lanes, she said. Not in one block, more like a smeared line. Some lagged, some led, all heading toward the industrial row behind you. No fire, no siren, just movement. Sol drew a new line on the map. If they follow the back road and keep turning toward noise, he said, they'll hit the community center lot, the maintenance yards, then our row. The inlet stays last. Unless somebody does something loud, I said, or tries to drive through and pushes them faster. Nia heard the edge in my voice. Dockhouse, if that row goes bad, you want less contact with it, not more. I meant what I said about that footbridge. A choke point is great until it's packed and leaning on your front door. We're thinking about it, I said. Think faster, she answered. Hilltop clear. Sol tapped the page. We can ride this out if they just cross behind the warehouses, he said. If they pour into the lots, that's different. They'll hit fences, dead trucks, locked doors, I said. Pressure builds. Some will spill over here just because there's space. They don't plan, but they follow. He looked at the walkway through the slot. From this angle, it was a steel line over muddy water. You really thinking about cutting our only land path? He asked. We have 3 paths, I said. Walkway, ladder, water. Two of those don't touch parking lots. If that herd stacks against this rail, they'll slam this frame until something gives. I'd rather it not be the hinges. We still need a way to move gear, he said. We move what we can now, I said. Anything that stays out there when the row fills up is gone anyway. We circled it while we packed. Tools, fasteners, fuel, cord, buckets, line, hooks, tarps, every piece of hardware small enough to move. The heavy stuff in the truck we rode off. When the last light slid off the roofs, we stood in the doorway and looked at the lot. Last chance to change your mind, Sewell said. I can't stop a herd at my door, I said. I can only change what they hit. We walked the length of the steel with the tool bag between us. I kept my eyes on the far end where the grating met cracked asphalt. The mud below was low and sticky. The tide sat near the bottom. If the bridge went in now, it wouldn't sink. It would buckle and sit tilted in the muck. At the lot end, the walkway rested on two concrete pedestals with bolts through the base plates. I set the wrench and breaker bar down. We take the near bolts off first, I said. Leave the far side in place so it doesn't jump while we're under it. Once those are loose, we cut the rail halfway back, tie a line to the frame, and pull from the dockhouse side. When it goes, it falls away from the door. And if it twists toward us? He asked. Then we cut the rail closer and pull again, I said. Standing out here talking is already stupid. Get those nuts started. We worked in short bursts. Loosen, listen, look. Salt had welded some pieces together. We broke two sockets before the last anchor at our end finally moved. Near side's floating now, Sewell said. He put a boot on the grate and bounced. The slab shifted a fraction and stopped, held by the far bolts. Back to the house, I said. We do the rest from where we live. Inside, we tied heavy rope around the midspan of the rail closest to the door, then wrapped it twice around the desk frame. I didn't want the bridge to swing free and take the ladder. I wanted it to drop and sit there as a useless rib. Last pass, I said. You cut, I pull. Out on the span, he moved in a crouch, cutting through the rail with a hacksaw. When the last section gave way, he backed toward me fast. Go, I said, bracing and hauling on the line. The loose end of the rail dropped. The far bolts held for a second, then one sheared. The structure lurched. The grate slammed against the pedestal, slid and tore free. The far end fell first, hitting the mud with a flat crunch. The midspan followed, twisting. The rope went tight and the near section swung toward the pilings, then settled at an angle mostly below the level of the door. Where the walkway had been, there was a gap of open air and brown water. No clean path from the lot to the threshold. You could still cross with a ladder or plank in time. You couldn't rush it as a group or lean on it as a wall. Sewell stared at the empty space. That's it then, he said. We just turned this place into an island. It always was an island, I said. Now the map matches the truth. Back inside, I called Hilltop. Dockhouse to Hilltop. Walkway is down. We're water access only. Copy, Nia said. Wind hissed in her mic. Row behind you is filling. That herd split on fences and wrecks, half stacked at the center, the rest smeared along the lane. You don't want any straight path from that lot to your door tonight. Good call. How bad? I asked. Bad enough I'm not going to count it, she said. From up here, your service road looks like a bad idea and your inlet still looks thin. We saw the walkway drop, marking you as isolated. Anyone else still holding inside town? I asked. She was quiet for a beat. We've got one farmhouse north on a hill, she said. They went dark on voice yesterday but still hang a tarp. We have one boat that checks in sometimes from past the markers. Inside the old town line, you're it. Nia's last report left no room for excuses. Inside the old town line, we were it. No one else was coming. One dockhouse on 6 legs and a tower on a hill watching it. After we dropped the walkway, the sound behind the warehouses changed. Less random banging, more steady pressure as bodies pushed along fences and into bays. From the roof hatch, I saw dust over the industrial row. Nothing headed for the inlet. We stayed off the roof after dark. Inside, we killed the light and sat on the floor where anyone scanning from land would see only a dead box. The gap where the bridge had been was just black water and mud. If someone wanted our door now, they needed a boat. "Think they know we're here?" Sewell asked. "They know something solid sits at this end," I said. "Whether they care depends on what makes more noise next." The herd slowly thinned. On the radio, Nia went from calling our row hot to cooling, but not clean. The hospital lot stayed packed. The bridge stayed broken. The community center went from shouting to nothing. 3 days after we cut the bridge, Sewell stiffened at the waterside window. "Engine," he said. "Small. Careful." I heard it a moment later. A quiet outboard working down the main channel. Not panic. Someone who knew how to stay alive and still had fuel. We eased the roof hatch open just enough to see. An aluminum skiff slid past the outer marker, bow low. 2 adults sat upright. A third shape lay under a tarp. They gave the burned marina and main pier a wide berth, then turned into our inlet. "They didn't just wander here," Sewell said. "No," I said. "Somebody told them, or they've been watching." The skiff throttled back as it neared our pilings. A woman in a sun-faded cap stood and raised both hands. The man at the tiller kept one hand on the handle, the other hooked on the gunnel. "Dockhouse," the woman called. "Hilltop said you were still holding. We're out of safe ground and almost out of gas. We're not infected." I answered from the hatch. "Hold that boat off the ladder and stay in it," I said. "Nobody steps on these boards until we talk and check their skin." She nodded. The motor cut. The boat drifted until it rocked a short distance from the ladder. "There are 4 of us," she said. 2 adults, 1 kid, 1 injured, no bites. "We heard this dockhouse is the only place left around here that isn't burning or screaming. We're not asking for luxury. Just somewhere that isn't collapsing while we figure out what comes next." "This isn't a shelter," I said. "We don't have much. If you stay, you work and follow rules. If you go without dragging anything to our door. That's all I can offer." A kid's face pushed the tarp aside. Maybe 12. "We'll work," he said. "I just don't want to go back up there." Smoke still hung above the hill. "Names," I said. "May," the woman answered. "Ellis on the tiller. Kid is Rowan. The one under the tarp is Tom. He fell down concrete stairs getting us out of a garage. We checked him. No bites." "We check again," I said. "One at a time up the ladder. Shirts up, sleeves back, no bags until we're sure." May let out a short breath that might have been a laugh. "We've heard worse deals," she said. We brought them up slow. No teeth marks. Tom's side was an ugly bruise with significant swelling, but his eyes were clear and he answered questions. We taped his ribs and set him near the inner wall, his good side toward the room. With 6 people inside, me, Saul, May, Ellis, Rowan, and 1 half-broken man, the dockhouse finally felt full. Every corner now had a body or a job. Sleeping pads in one corner, tools on one wall, food and water on another, radio table under the slot. That night, with the radio off and one covered lamp on, I laid out the situation. "As far as we know, this is the last steady place inside town," I said. "Hilltop has watched every big room that tried to be safe and failed. We're not repeating that. We stay quiet. We keep lights low. We don't open the door just because someone yells. We don't go looking for trouble. We don't promise more than we can give." May nodded. "And if somebody hits the ladder tomorrow screaming?" "We do what I did with you," I said. "We look, we listen, we check for bites and for what's behind them. If it's clean and the risk makes sense, we decide together. If there's a hurt at their back or blood down their arms, we stay dark and trust the gap where the bridge used to be." Rowan stared at the floor. "So no rescue coming?" "If rescue comes, we'll hear it on the band or spot it past the markers," I said. "Until then, this is what we have. 6 people, 1 box, and rules that have worked so far. The weeks that followed were dull on the surface. Dawn and dusk with Hilltop. Small herd broke off the ridge. Bridge still blocked. No fresh fires. Never help is on the way. Inside, we did the work that never makes it into stories. Catching rain off the roof into clean containers. Testing, boiling, marking jugs so we knew what was safe. Fishing enough to live, but not enough to strip the inlet. Patching clothes, checking hinges and rope. Teaching Rowan 3 good knots and when to keep his head down. Sometimes at night I climbed to the roof alone and looked back at town. No porch lights, no hospital glow, no traffic on the hill. Just dark blocks and one steady blink from Hilltop's tower on the ridge. From up there, our dockhouse didn't look like much. A faded box over bad water, one broken bridge, ladder, 6 people trying not to make the wrong kind of noise. It didn't look like the only safe place in town. It looked like the last place no one had managed to ruin yet. For now, that was enough. As long as the legs held and we stuck to our rules, the dockhouse stayed off the list of lost spots. Hilltop's map could call it the last safe point. We just called it home, and the one piece of ground we still had a real chance to keep. If you enjoyed the story, please like, subscribe, and comment where you're listening from. See you in the next one.